So I translate Tzeniut as privacy rather than modesty. And modesty has all sorts of meanings and comes with a lot of baggage, but privacy is something we understand. And the idea of privacy has nuance. The shir is the nuance of privacy. Avodah dbiado lo mitchazeh, Zevachim daf samach amud aleph. Tzeniut, this idea of privacy is not an objective one-size-fits-all, that you can just define Tzeniut in terms of objective measurements. Tzeniut is a character trait, and it's circumstantial. It's relative to situations and to circumstances, as we'll see. The idea of Tzeniut is foundational, and the prophet Micha refers to it, and the Gemara, both in Sukkah and in Makos, talks about its centrality. Yigid lecha adam matov. Hashem will tell us what is the goodness that Hashem doresh mimcha, that Hashem wants for you. It's nothing but ki asot mishpat va'avat chesed, to do justice and love kindness, v'hatznei alechet im elokecha, and to deal with Hashem with tzniut, to do the things that you do in a way that is tzniut. It's not good enough just to do kindness and to do mishpat. It all has to be done in a way that is private. So merely from a passing statement of the Gemara, we'll understand something so foundational in the idea of tzniut, in the idea of privacy. The Gemara says, "Ul Rabbi Yehuda hakam mitchazei kohen." Rabbi Yehuda holds that the mizbeach was 3 amot high, and the klaim, the fence around the azara, was 5 amot high. So if you take the 3 amot of the mizbeach, and you've got a kohen standing on the mizbeach, and the average size of a kohen is 3 amot, that means the kohen's head is 6 amot above the ground, and the fence is 5 amot above the ground. It emerges that you can see the kohen from outside the Beis HaMikdash. Answers the Gemara, no, yes, you can see the kohen's head. His head is above the fence. Avodah dbiado lo mitchazeh. But the avodah, what he's doing with his hands, the service, the sacrifice that he's bringing, is not visible to the outside. You can't see from outside the fences. So this idea of not being able to see what's going on inside is quite interesting. I've often used to wonder, when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, are they going to have video cameras inside so that you can watch and live stream what's going on in the Azora, maybe even in the Kodesh Kadoshim? You see from this Gemara, no ways. There won't be any cameras at all. Rabbi Michal Feinstein, so we've had Rabbi Michal Feinstein and Rabbi David Lapin are 2 modern guiding teachers through this Masechta, because we've got their work, and their work is amazing. We've talked before, Rabbi Michal Feinstein was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's nephew, and was the son-in-law of the Brisker Rov. And he has an interesting blend of Brisker Torah and the more conventional Lithuanian Yeshiva Torah. And Rabbi David Lapin, who we'll also learn today, is the son of the Brisker Rov. And these 2, we have their shiurim, and they're amazing in giving us direction. And Rabbi Michal Feinstein analyzes what is the problem with the head of the Kohen being above the fence. Is the problem is that he's doing the avodah in an area that isn't fenced off, which isn't demarcated, because the demarcation only goes a certain height, and he's higher than that, and you're not allowed to do the avodah except in the area demarcated as the Beis HaMikdash, as the Azara. That's where you can do it. Outside of that area, you're not allowed to do it. So is the problem that if there isn't a fence at the level of the Kohen, he's doing it out in the open, it's not in the demarcated area? Or is the problem tzniut? And the Rabbi Michal Feinstein says, you see from the answer of the Gemara, where the Gemara says, no, the head of the Kohen is above the fence, it's the avodah, it's what he's doing that is below the fence. You see that hu inyan shel tzniut ba'alma, what we're concerned about here is tzniut. We're concerned about the privacy in the performance of the mitzvah, in the performance of the avodah. That you can see the Kohen is not a problem, that it would be a problem if you could see the avodah. The avodah has to be done in private. And that's such a beautiful idea, that the avodah is so non-performative. It's so not about a spectacle. It's so not about the drama. People don't even see it. It's done in secret. It's done in privacy. And that's unique in all the religions of the world, that our most important avodot are done in places where they can't even be seen. And it's not only the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash. We have this principle from the Posuk in Micha that we learned, of Hatznei Alech, and we have the Gemara in Makos and in Sukkot, where the Gemara says that you've got to deal with Hashem in privacy. Zeh hotzaat hamet v'achnasat kala. Even matters that are done in public, such as funerals and weddings, they also have to be done in privacy. We'll see what that means in Rashi. And so you can make a kal vachomer. You can extrapolate from that. If public events like funerals and weddings that are attended by many people should still be done in privacy, it applies. How much more so things that are done in privacy have to be specific, especially private. And Rashi says, even weddings should be done b'tzeniut. What does that mean? Lis'od b'midah na'ah. To eat nicely. It doesn't have to be over the top. So have a nice wedding and you behave well. V'lismoach b'midah na'ah. And the dancing doesn't have to be wild. And the music doesn't have to be wild. In fact, it shouldn't be. It should be na'eh. It should be pleasant. Which is hardly the word I would use to describe as most music at these simchas. Pleasant music. I wouldn't call it pleasant. Wild is closer to it, but that's not what the Torah wants. And not to act in wild ways, and not to act with kalut rosh, even at weddings. And Yeshomrim, and then Rashi brings a second explanation of this from the Sheiltos, which we'll see it right now. Says the Sheiltos at the top of the next page of the source sheet. The Sheiltos is Rav Achai Gaon, 7th century. So this was the first publication we have after the Gemara. That's enormously authoritative. We don't have a lot from the Gaonim. We've talked about that before. But the Sheiltos is one of the really authoritative source of Rav Achai, which is just after the period of the Gemara. And he says, explaining this Gemara, Delo lema kamiman delo yada, so that you don't go telling people who don't know, Hachi avdi v'hachi avdi, I did such and such and I did such and such, lishtabuche benafshi, so as to praise yourself, so as to self-promote. You don't do self-promotion. And therefore Rashi says what this means in our context is, if you subsidize the wedding, if you sponsored the wedding, you don't talk about it. If you helped with the arranging the levaya, you don't talk about it. That's hatznei alechet. So this idea of the non-performative nature of mitzvot is crucial and critical to Torah, and something that in the Lithuanian tradition was emphasized enormously. Not to do anything that might be motivated by a desire for self-promotion rather than actually doing the mitzvah. And that's why anything which the halacha didn't require was public, they used to do very quietly. That's why they didn't wear their tzitzit out. And those that did wear the tzitzit out wore long jackets, so you couldn't see it through the jacket. If they took their jackets off, you would see their tzitzit, but they never took their jackets off. They used to study Torah with jackets, they used to sit in shul with a jacket, that's how they were. Because that's something which could be seen from the outside. Their davening would be fairly quiet and calm, it wouldn't be wild, they wouldn't shout out. Anything that could be seen as self-promotional was cut down. This seems to be in conflict with the tshuvas of the Rashbo in Siman Tafkuf Pei Aleph, in his first set of tshuvas, which is brought in the Mogen Avron and Siman Kuf Nun Daled as well, where the Rashbo is asked about somebody who gave money to a shul, built a shul, and wanted his name on the shul. And the community wasn't too happy about that. Says the Rashbo, I can't see any reason to prevent that, to stop that. If a person gives money to the shul, it's his own. He's giving, he can put whatever conditions he wants on it. Va'odi says, there are many shuls that do this. Gam bimkomenu, in our shul, who katuv b'kotel ha'echal shul, Beit HaKnesset. He says, go into my shul, says the Rashba, and you'll see people's names on the walls. V'zeh midat chachamim hi, and that's a wise thing to do. Midat vatikin, and it's an old midah. Kedei litein schar lo yisei mitzvah, so as to reward and recognize people who've done a mitzvah. Umidat Torah, it's the same. The Torah also tells us about people who did mitzvahs. There are many cases where the Torah tells us about people who did mitzvahs. And so there seems to be a tension between the Rashbo, and it's brought the halacha, the Rashbo's sense that we should, that if one gives Money, there's nothing wrong in publicizing the fact that one gave the money. And the shield is based on our Gemara that makes it very clear you don't go around publicizing. It's something that you should keep quiet. How do we resolve the two? And I would suggest that the way to resolve it is in a very subtle word in the Shi'iltis. And we'll look at a very subtle nuance in this area of privacy and publicity. The law lema says the Shi'iltis, in the bolded piece of the Shi'iltis at the top of the second page, the law lema kamiman de lo yada, that you don't say in front of one who doesn't know, Hachi avdi v'achi avdi, I did such and such and such and such. To self-promote. Why is the Shi'iltis adding de lo lema kamiman de lo yada? And I suggest what the Shi'iltis is teaching us is there are some people who have a reason to know, and some people have no reason to know. If we're members of the community and one member of the community has given a donation to the community, we should know about it. We should be able to say thank you to him. We should be aware of it. We should want to do the same thing. So if you're telling man de yoda, you're telling it to somebody who knows about it already. He sees it. He's in shul every day. He sees the benefit, and you just say, I feel privileged that I was able to do this for the shul. That's not a problem. But now you're at a function, and there are people from other shuls. They're not concerned about your shul. They don't need to know that you gave money to your shul. And you start talking about it, kame man de lo yada, in front of people who are not part of the inner circle. So there's an inner circle and an outer circle. To let the inner circle know you've done something good is positive. To tell the outer circle that you've done something good can only be self-promotional. Why else are you doing it? They don't need to know. You tell the people who need to know. The people who don't need to know, you don't tell. It's interesting that in business and in politics, we know this principle, a need-to-know basis. You tell people what they need to know. If they don't need to know, there's no reason to tell them. It's a strategic principle, we know that. But when it comes to self-promotion, we turn it around almost. People who don't need to know, we're busy telling. Says the Shi'iltis, no, not to say it kame man de lo yadi. Because if you're telling it to people who are not involved, then it's lishtabuchi benafshe, then you're doing it for self-promotion, not for any other reason. It seems that we can understand this from a little comment of Rabbi David Soloveitchik on our Gemara. Because Rabbi David Soloveitchik asks a question, he says, V'afar gav sheha'am ha'omdim b'fnim b'vadai ra'u. Are we so worried about the privacy of the avodah? But there were people who could stand inside the azara. There was a small section where you could stand and you could watch. Not that many people could be in that section at any one time, but people could be there. It wasn't completely secret and it wasn't completely private. There's a difference between secret and private. Secret is nobody can see. Private is you restrict who can see. Ask Rabbi David Soloveitchik, but the people who could stand there in the Azara, they were watching the whole avodah. It's not private at all. Answers Rabbi David, Letlan ba, we don't worry about that. Dahakpeda al tzeniut ba'avoda hi rak klapei ha'omdim b'chutz. And I think you can take this as a life principle. Dahakpeda al tzeniut ba'avoda hi rak klapei ha'omdim b'chutz. The objection to publicity is only for those who are standing outside. There are the people who are inside and the people who are outside. If the people who are outside are watching, are they participants or observers? They're observers. That's the problem with Tzeniut. Observers. A participant is not an observer. A participant, the people who are standing inside the Azara, although they're not Kohanim, they're not doing the Avodah, but they're participants. They're there in order to be part of what's happening. You don't have Tzeniut in front of people who are participating in your life. So the Tzeniut now becomes, there are circles of different distances from oneself that determine the level of Tzeniut. So the way that one is tzanua with one's wife is different from the way one is tzanua with the rest of one's family. The way one is tzanua, the privacy that one expresses in one's family circle, is different from the privacy one expresses outside of one's family circle. And the privacy one shows out in the public is again a different privacy. The further outward you move, the more the outsider becomes an observer. And Tzeniut is about excluding observers. It's not about performance. It's not about observers. But if the people are part of your life, that's not where Tzeniut applies. And we see this beautifully expressed in the Netziv, in the Ha'amek She'ela. The Netziv, crucially important person in connecting modern Torah to the earlier Torah. The Netziv was the Reb Chaim Volozhner's son-in-law. So after Reb Chaim Volozhner came his son Reb Itzler Volozhner. And Reb Itzler Volozhner's son-in-law was the Netziv, Reb Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. And the Netziv was the Rosh Yeshiva of Volozhin for a long time after Reb Itzler, and he really built the yeshiva into what it was. He and Rabbi Yoshe Soloveitchik were joint Rosh Yeshivas. The two of them together built the whole next generation of Rosh Yeshivas. So they were functioning in the 19th century. All the early 20th century Rosh Yeshivas were educated by the Netziv and Rabbi Yoshe Soloveitchik in Volozhin Yeshiva. That was the mother of all the yeshivas that came since there and here as a subsequent. So the Netziv is crucially important. He's known popularly because of his Sefer, the Ha'amek Dover on Chumash, everybody knows. But his real work was the Ha'amek She'ela on the She'iltus. And on the She'iltus, this one he writes, Di'inyan tzniut hakol lefi midat derech eretz. Tzniut has to be calibrated according to the custom, according to derech eretz. שהרי גם בהוויות העולם יש דברים שעושים אותם בפני רבים להראות כוחו ועוצם ידו. There are times where you will do something in public to show your power. You're the President of the United States, you will do certain things out there, you'll be out there a bit, you want people to know that you're powerful. You're a private person, less so. כמו עשיר שלובש בגדים יקרים להתנאות בפני רבים. A wealthy person will dress wealthily, so that people should understand his position in society. ואין זה יוצא ממידת צניעות. And it's not a lack of tzeniut for a wealthy person to dress in a wealthy way. אבל התפארת בקול גדול, but to run around telling everybody how much money you've got, that's not nice. That's already going beyond. אין זה מתקבל וגם הוא מגונה, and that's also מגונה. ויש דברים אפילו לעשות בפני רבים מגונה, and some things even to do in public is ugly. כגון שאוכל כמסת עושרו להראות חזותו לרבים, יוצא מדרך צניעות. To eat in a very ostentatious way so as to demonstrate your wealth. וכמו כן במצוות, and the same applies in mitzvahs. יש דברים שמתקבל ונאה לעשותם ברבים, there are some mitzvot that you want to do in public, ורק התפארות מגונו, and just going out and publicizing it is ugly. ויש דברים דאפילו העודה לרבים מגונה, and there are some mitzvot that even to let people see it, just to do it in public is ugly. ומידת דרך ארץ גלוי לכל ולא הוסיף לנו הפסוק. This understanding of derech eretz, you don't need the Torah for that. Anybody with a sensitivity to circumstance and situation knows how to calibrate his interaction, his projection onto the world in a way that is midat derech eretz. ולא הוסיף לנו הפסוק הצנע לכת, רק תעשו לצא מגדר הצניעות ומבזה מצוות שמיים על ידי זה. When you go beyond the principles of tzeniut in mitzvot, not just in day-to-day life, in mitzvot itself, when you break the barriers of tzeniut, one is mevazeh mitzvot shamayim, you are disgracing the mitzvah. One has to be really careful, and he goes through many Gemaras where we see that. Even when it comes to limud Torah, the Gemara is specific, even about learning and teaching Torah, there has to be an element of tzeniut. How one weakens the Torah and cheapens the Torah by advertising it. To advertise, to let people know that there's a shir taking place in such and such a place at such a time, that's fine. You want to let people know. That's informative. But to be a publicist, to make it, to go out in order to publicize and promote, that's mevazeh the mitzvah. That actually cheapens the mitzvah itself. It's not necessary to do that. And we learn all of this from the avodah. The avodah had to be done behind the fence. You could see the kohen, but not the avodah. And as Reb Michael Feinstein says, that's because of a midah of tzniut. And although, as Reb Meshulam David says, we don't mind the people of the inner circle seeing because they're engaged, but we don't want the people who are outside of the fence to be part of the spectacle, because then it becomes a spectacle. and then it becomes performative in nature. And so we need to understand Tzeniut is not something that is measured in terms of centimeters. It's not a fashion statement of clothing. It's a midah, it's a way of behaving, and it varies according to circumstance, and it varies according to situations. There are times when one wants to project oneself very forcibly on one's environment, and there are times when one wants to stand back. It's a little bit like Yehuda and Binyamin that we talked about, that Binyamin is the idea of Yesod, of there's a time to hold back and leave space for others. And Yehuda is an idea of Malchus, where there's an idea to go out forward and be Poretz Geder and open boundaries and open barriers. These are two different midot, and we each have both of them and have to calibrate our behavior at all times.